All right, everybody, welcome to another session of On Air with Lithium. Today we're talking about gamification, and I think as many of you know, Pokemon Go has been so popular. There's been a lot of talk about it, and I'm sure many of you have seen the Lithium Go competition going on in our Lithium community as well. So gamification is an increasingly popular topic, and that's why we decided to focus on it today for our session. And we've got an amazing group of panelists here with us. I just wanted to give some quick intros. So my name is Jen. I'm the Lithium Community Manager here. Really excited to talk gamification, and now I'll turn it over to our panelists.
Hi, my name is Nick. I work as the Community Manager at WebRoot.
Good morning, this is Donnie Weinstein. I'm the Senior Community Manager at Domo. Very happy to be here today.
Great, and I'm Jeff Terrell. I'm the Director of Support Community for GoPro. Glad to be here too.
And finally, I'm Pete Kloss, also working at Lithium as a community consultant and career-long community manager as well. Previously in the games industry, coincidentally enough.
Perfect. So, we have a lot of questions here. Some of them were posted in the Lithium community blog, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the community or tweet us using hashtag #OnAirWithLithium. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. So the topic today is gamification, but what would you guys say the definition of gamification is?
Well, I'll go and start. For me, it's always been about finding ways to motivate your community members to engage in ways that you want them to engage in. So it's mostly a motivation practice. And so it's a matter of setting up rewards and challenges and steps to sort of move them along this journey of sort of exploring the community, to engaging it, to becoming experts in the community.
Great, Jeff. And as a follow-on to that, really it's about how do you engage and motivate and generate that level of participation so that effectively you're creating a community that's going to be self-serving for itself as well as for your potential goals. You can't do it with monetary rewards necessarily. It has to be using the gamification types of platforms, whether it be intangibles like badging and ranks and so forth, or permissions. But the net is that the people who are excited about the topic brand have to feel that there's a way to climb that ladder, get recognized for providing quality content and generating great conversations.
For me, it's in the name. You're making a game out of it. You're trying to make the experience fun, and you're trying to amplify the intrinsic motivation that people have to want to participate and engage socially, and kind of add extrinsic, rewards on top of that to kind of keep the fun going and recognize the milestones that people have reached.
Yeah, I guess there isn't too much more for me to add to that, but it really is just about the things that game designers have known for years, what the things in games that make them fun, and then applying them outside of gaming to other activities, and I think ideally fairly subtly encouraging and reinforcing the behaviors that you want the community to exhibit, using things like that we'll discuss, such as ranking and badges and all the other elements of gamification. So it's kind of works with the community rather than replacing it, turning it all into a game. It's taking what works from games and using them in a complementary way to drive increased behaviors and sort of making people more engrossed in the community, really, by rewarding them and showing them that yes, what you just did is a really good thing. Keep at it.
Perfect. And like Pete alluded to, you want your gamification system to be complementary to your community, right? You don't want to have gamification for the sake of gamification. So that brings a certain amount of meaningful gamification to the picture. And I think what that looks like is looking at the goals of your community and what you want to do gamify the system and tying those in together. So for you guys, for the communities that you manage, what are the goals for your community?
So this is Donnie. So for us, with Doma, we're a fairly young company, pre-IPO, and it's very much a customer-centric community that we're building out. And so, given the fact that we are rapidly growing, the product is evolving literally by the week. We really see the community as a tremendous way to generate incredible content, to connect all those customers together. We had been in a stage of our early life cycle where every customer had to sign an NDA. They couldn't talk about our product. We've kind of evolved into more of a public type of domain, and so essentially the goals are really to crowdsource that conversation about what is Domo, how do you use Domo, how do you make the best use of Domo, and using the power of community to crowdsource great content, provide solutions, integrate that with our content management system, support deflection, and really recognize and generate value for the brand. And so the gamification element really helps us to identify what we call our, in the community world we call them super fans or super users. Internally we call them major domos. And so there's really tremendous benefit to integrate all of those values across the various business processes that we have developed.
Great. At GoPro, our community is primarily a support community. It's called a support hub. And it's a fairly young community. It's less than a year old. And similar to what Donnie was saying, we've got a system where we're trying to answer the questions that maybe haven't been asked before. So we have a pretty extensive FAQ on our site. We have tutorial videos. We have all kinds of ways to sort of help people understand our products and get the most out of them. But there are always going to be these one-offs, these sort of, these use cases that we hadn't necessarily anticipated. And our support hub is a great place for people to bring those in. So we want to have experts on the platform who are real users, who are authentically using the products and have maybe been through these similar case scenarios. They're able to help troubleshoot and do that sort of high-touch support for other members, and it's much more of a friendly sort of a colleague discussion more than sort of a help discussion they might get from calling one of our CS agents. So really being able to sort of take those edge cases and bring them together, and then sort of inspiring people to sort of say, oh, I didn't know you could use the product in that way. So they are creating tons of new content, tons of great answers that future users who have similar questions will be able to find.
For us here at WebRoot, it's a combination. So we have a traditional support aspect to our community. We also have a private employee section for employees to talk to each other, and we also encourage them to participate on the public side of the community. And then we also have private discussion areas for running betas or for talking with some of our VIPs behind the scenes. So we want to encourage all those different facets of conversation. We also have a section board discussing security industry news, so anything that comes up that might be relevant around internet security or computer security.
It's really interesting hearing the different goals there, and I guess that highlights the important point that you want to have sort of build on your goals for the community, following that up with gamification goals and making sure you're not trying to do absolutely everything. So you're just really focusing the gamification offering and the notifications that customers get on the behaviors that you want to drive in line with your community goals, rather than just trying to give them every possible badge and rewarding every single behavior with ranking up. It should be reasonably targeted so it's having the effect you want, and almost as importantly, not spamming the users as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you want to be able to, excuse me, if you want to be able to implement gamification in a meaningful way and make sure it's meaningful not only for your community on the internal business side of things, but also be able to implement it in a meaningful way for your users. And I think we have a really good panel here where people are in different stages of their community, and so there's a couple like more formal ways such as badges and things like that that we can do, but there's also quick implementations that we can have in order to encourage participation or to marry basically that relationship between gamification and the goals of your community. So let's move on to our next question. How did you guys implement gamification in your community?
So I'll jump in. Our community is probably one of the younger ones. It's like I said, it's less than a year old. But I've worked on previous communities before. But for this one, we really started with just getting the basics in place. We really did look at what were the behaviors we wanted to reward, and we're sort of at what I would consider like a phase 1 of gamification, where we are really looking at sort of those basic things of getting repeat visitation, trying to get content, trying to make sure that we've got good solutions to questions out there. So our gamification has really been built around the basics of really good badges and a basic set of ranking structures. It's not as fleshed out as it will be in the next several months. We're working that sort of more of a phase 2. But it's really for us was a matter of sort of sitting down and saying, what do we want to reward? What are the behaviors we want? And then going into it and working with our creative team, our in-house creative team, because we didn't want it to be cookie cutter. We wanted it to be something that was very specific to the GoPro community. So our badges have got names that are more aligned with what we would do. So, example, within Lithium, you can give kudos or likes, and we've rebranded those to high fives. So it's just sort of a way we get the high five. And then we want to make sure that we were recognizing and letting people know when they got sort of any kind of a badge, or especially if they got even just a high five from somebody. So we really worked hard to sort of enhance our automated emails that go out whenever someone receives a badge or gets the high five notification. So we tweaked sort of all those badge notification messages. We tweaked the message, the format of the letters themselves, so that it looked like it was coming from GoPro. It looked very fancy, but it also had words that we would have used. So I mean, like, if you are someone who replies, you're not just a replier, you're a wingman because you're helping people out. If you are someone who gives out a lot of high fives, you get the dishing out fives badge. And then when we put we use a word within our company quite a bit, which is the word stoke. We get stoked about things. So whenever we give out a badge, a lot of times at the end of it, it'll say like, keep spreading the stoke, or anything like that. It sort of is a little bit more in line with what our brand would say versus what another brand would say. So it was really a matter about really bringing the personality of our company into our gamification.
I think that approach is really important, to add that personality and just make it clear that you've really, to the community members, that you've really tried to personalize this whole offering to them, gamification, but also the overall look and language of the community, like you said. And you mentioned phase 2 there as well, which is sometimes a necessity. Like, all these things take time, but sometimes even just a good idea. There's the saying of keep some of your powder dry, so always have something new to offer the community. So I think it's sometimes a necessity, but sometimes even a good idea to make sure you're not trying to just launch everything you can think of with gamification at once, but also having some extra stuff that you plan to launch in a few months' time, just so the community is always fresh and updated, and there's something for them to look forward to. And so phase 2 is sometimes a necessity, but sometimes even a good idea.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Pete, for us, we're looking at how do we get more of the deeper content in that phase 2. So yeah, we're going to definitely be working on ideas like boot camps or contests and challenges that really sort of target the exact content we're looking for. So yeah, definitely have, I like to say, an infinite growth plan of where the community can go.
Yeah, we ran into that when we launched our badges. So I announced to the power users, here are the levels we're shooting for various activities, and they pushed me to, give extra, goals beyond that they might not even ever reach in terms of, tens of thousands of posts or kudos, just because they wanted something to aspire to. And we started out with a ranking system with swag and recognition associated with that, and then we layered the badges on top of that when they came out. So we have both of those systems, and now that we have some folks who've reached the top level on our community, we're looking at maybe adding some team goals or some kind of community as a whole goals that we can have badges for. So it's not just individual achievements. It's also looking at the achievement of the entire community or a team of folks in that community.
Yeah, and to the points that have already been made, in our case with Domo, we actually call our community the dojo, and we've taken that, very much that dojo theme. So our ranking structure is actually based on belts, color belts, and we started out with a handful. We've actually added a few more recently. We deployed badging early on, and beyond that, we've also run a few contests in addition to having a VIP lunch at our customer conference. So we've had not only the intangibles within the community, but also personal recognition at our customer conference. And as Jeff had pointed out, it's certainly an evolution. So we're still, evolving as a community in year 1, year 1.5, and there's really a whole roadmap of things that we will be adding in order to drive the right behaviors. I came here with a lot of experience from my previous life, and so kind of done it on a global scale in multiple languages, and going to continue on here.
That's just one other important point when that you kind of touched on with implementation. It's important to make sure there isn't kind of an upper limit, and not just with ranks but with badges. And that was actually one of the mistakes I made with my very first community, which was a kind of a gaming community, and the top rank was like Army General, and then who is there above the general in an army? So that's just another thing. Make sure that there's always scope to expand. Whenever you're implementing or tying in gamification, make sure you're not sort of naming or branding anything as like an upper limit. It should always be expandable, because they will reach what you think are insurmountable targets sooner than you can imagine.
Yeah, agreed. You'd be amazed what your power users will reach eventually, the most dedicated of them. One other kind of distinction in terms of badges is badges for activities versus badges for identity. So you want to make sure to have some of each, so that if someone's a beta tester, they get recognized with a badge. We just launched some country badges so that you can see where people are from. That helps people to have a sense of belonging, get to know each other. Also helps to know what time zone they're in, or what their whether English is their first language or not. So some of those things are useful, as well as just driving activity.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's badges that you can implement in a meaningful way for all kinds of things, right? There's badges for activity, rewarding them for doing certain things. There's badges for identity, as Nick pointed out. And one thing that I wanted to bring up too is that there's badges for events, them participating in events. So for example, for Link, we have badges for that. We have badges for our leaderboards at Link, which I know a lot of community members got really engaged in, trying to be at the top of that leaderboard every day. So I would think, for communities out there, if you're implementing badges, think about all the touch points that your customers or that your community users have with the brand, and think about how you can implement badges for those touch points.
And Jen, just quick on that, I think that's such a key point of sort of surprising your community members, and maybe not always telling them what the next progression level is, but letting them sort of explore and discover what your community is about. And I remember, I think of badging, one of the first groups I ever encountered it with was using the Foursquare app, 4 or 5 years ago, and you would find you get a badge on a specific day just because it was a special day to the company. And there was no way to prep for that. You just happened to check in on that day, and you got a sort of surprise badge. And it's like, oh, this is kind of fun. Let's see what else we got. It makes you want to come back the next day and see if there's something special on that day as well. Yeah,
to that point, one of the really engaging areas of our community has been around ideation. Again, given the fact that we're a young innovative company startup, we really need to crowdsource how our customers are using product, and so. Beyond your traditional community side, where ranking would be based on kudos and posts and so forth, and even solutions, ideation, you're not necessarily going to be driving solutions. But one of our top leaders has just received so many likes because of the fact that she's been driving so much ideation. That's helped her drive up the level where she has reached. And so we've actually added innovation badges, which have been very popular as well.
Cool. So I think you guys spoke a little bit into this, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper. There's rewards that we are able to implement through gamification, right? So there's intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. And so I'm interested to know, how do you guys implement each one, and how do you decide on having each one?
So this is Tony. As far as the intrinsic ones go, again, sort of the philosophy based on experience is that you're fairly restricted on spending tangible dollars on your superfans, and so it has to really be driven by the elements that are powered in the community, whether it be ranking, badges, and so forth, or permissions. But then even beyond that, from an extrinsic perspective, you've got to marry that with having some sort of face-to-face meetups, either online, phone conference, in person, as they rise through the ranks, and you sort of recognize who are those most valuable players. But it's certainly a fine balance. There's no necessary cookie cutter formula to it. But you also want to be restrictive as far as how far you want to go with that, because there has to be sort of a perceived level of segmentation between those top members and the general community.
I think I would even say, like having been on community teams, getting budget to splash out on super users isn't just difficult, but something I tend to not recommend, just because it changes the relationship. Suddenly they're not doing it because they love it, and you're rewarding them with these sort of intangible rewards that still mean something in the context of the community. But if you're kind of giving them like iPads or phones, then it kind of becomes less like a voluntary thing that they do for love, and more like employment, and that's a whole kind of kettle of fish that you don't necessarily want to open. And if they're not doing it because they love it, then it's sort of less effective. And
the other key point that I kind of felt to call out earlier, which I think is the others will kind of chime in on, especially given several of us are in early phases, or that phase one, but as you get into phase two and beyond, you certainly need to call out and make clear that there is a renewal process, or it's sort of once you reach the top of the mountain, and you're not going to stay there forever. There needs to be the right behaviors in order to renew that VIP status, and I think that's a key component to sustainability of managing your community long term with gamification.
Yeah, it's like equally if they have life changes and so on, then they're welcome to step out without any problems. It's just, you're right, it's establishing that guideline and saying, there's a certain level of participation that we would expect or appreciate, and equally, if you need to leave at any time, don't feel pressured, that's totally fine.
Yeah, and following up on that, kind of be careful of extinguishing intrinsic motivation. I mean, there's some notable studies out there that show this, where they took children and they pay them to play with a particular toy, say a truck, and then after they've gone through that experience, they put them in a room with a whole bunch of toys, and they can choose whatever they want. And what they found is they're less likely to play with the toy that they were previously paid to play with once they're free to play with anything. So you can see that extinction of intrinsic motivation if you're not careful.
Yeah, and similar to what the other guys have said, we don't do a lot of monetary rewards or anything of significant value. When as we get sort of super users, as we get people who are very, very active and very, very good on our community, I have done what the other guys have said. We've reached out privately. We've had long conversations with them. It's been much more about a personal connection. I think the only thing that we've actually rewarded anybody in the community with was maybe one of our beanie hats. It's just one of those things that for some reason swag that we have around the office is still very highly prized, because it's not something that's readily available. So something with your company logo on it is pretty easy to sometimes get your hands on, doesn't cost a whole lot, and we can send that out. I think I've done that for 3 or 4 people total, so it's not like a huge outreach. But what we find is that giving them sort of a little bit more autonomy in the community, or giving them those privileges, things that they can do within the community that give them a little bit more of a status, or a little bit more access to actually improving the community in ways that they think that it can be improved, had been much more well received by those members. So we've got feedback channels where they can contact me, or We can set up private groups for people who've reached a certain level, and they can communicate amongst themselves. We're also looking at trying to incorporate some of them into some of our in-house programs that aren't necessarily community-based. So, for example, when we're always constantly doing beta tests on new products or new services. So I'm working with that team trying to figure out if there's a way we can incorporate some of our most active community members who are obviously big fans of what we do into those types of programs. So it's not necessarily a monetary reward, but it's where they have the ability to shape the community or shape the products that they'll be using in the future.
I love that idea of giving them extra privileges as part of gamification and part of the reward system, because it's not something that actually costs you anything. And I know for many community managers out there, cost and budget is a factor, right, as you plan out different initiatives. So for the rest of you guys, kind of expanding on Jeff's point there, what are some ways that you maybe have taken that same idea and used it in gamification for your communities?
One of the ways that we give our power users access is when they reach one of the top tiers of the VIP levels, one of the rewards they get is kind of a trip out to Webroot headquarters. So we fly them in, put them up, and they get to spend a day here talking to all the various folks that they've met through the community, support, developers, QA, folks like that. And that's something, again, where they really appreciate the access to, being able to talk to people within the company they might not otherwise be able to.
Yeah, I did even have one customer that I've worked with at Lithium where they were able to, some of their top users, not just people in the formal soup user program, but sort of other knowledgeable and very active users that they identified through the gamification system, like the people at the top of the ranking system and so on, and they were able to invite them to a major product launch on the marketing budget, actually, just treating them as press, basically, and then they even created content afterwards, fed that information back into the community. So that was another great reward that was, I guess, ultimately didn't have to come out of the community budget, but it just had many knock-on effects as well. But it was ultimately building on what sort of identifying these people through gamification.
Yeah, in our case, we've, as I said, we're only about 17 months into our community lifecycle right now in English, a little bit shorter in Japanese. But basically, in our case, we recognized our top handful of community members, most liked author, top solution author, ideation champions at our customer conferences last year. In addition to the contest winners that we had for both first place and second place, we had either full or subsidized passes to our conference. And so that led to a VIP lunch, very well received. And then beyond that, what we're starting to do and putting a roadmap around this, and it's kind of interesting because going from a consumer-oriented community to now one where most of our customers are from large enterprise or corporate environments, we're starting to do regional meetups as we start to identify where our superfans are located. And we're actually getting, some of them are so motivated they're actually volunteering to host meetups. And so actually in the middle of planning our next one in the Bay Area. So again, in order to get an invite to those events, you need to be very active in the community and recognized as a top performer.
Cool. So let's go on. I think we've covered rewards pretty well, and definitely, we can create meaningful rewards for people, and a lot of those are, like privileges, like our panelists talked about. But no program is perfect, right? No initiative is perfect, and you're always going to have people who try to game the system. They hack in somehow. They find out that secret formula. And so for you guys, what are some ways that you prevent people from gaming the system?
So in our case, because of the structure that we have vis-a-vis our single sign-on implementation, it requires a Adobe user license and a user login in order to get access or log into our dojo. And the fact that those are highly controlled, it actually allows us to keep a good handle on the registered members in our community because we know that they all have to be customers. Having said that, there are a few that have kind of gotten through the cracks, and we haven't noticed any particular situations to date of people gaming the system. But again, you got to kind of keep an eye on those people that are showing up and moving up the ranks really quickly, taking a look at the solutions that they provided, the likes that they've received, who's giving the likes that they received, and is it a broad representation of the community, or are all the likes coming from one or two people? And so those are sort of signals that of a potential person who may be gamifying. And in previous life, when it was not a full-on validated single sign-on, or you could have had multiple email addresses to create multiple accounts, it was a lot easier to get around the system.
Yeah, we had one situation. This was at my previous job at Spiceworks. So there was a product review section where people could go and review products, and one guy, and you would get points for that towards your ranking. So he went in there, and this is typical. People would review a whole bunch of things to try and get a bunch of points. And this guy overnight sat there writing shorter and progressively shorter and shorter reviews just to get them done, until finally he was just putting a period and hitting enter for each review. So when I discovered that in the morning, I had to sit there and delete 150 reviews by hand. So we did a couple things to kind of guard against that. One was giving a bulk delete option to make that easier to clean up, and then also setting some minimum word limits on the reviews so that they couldn't just go in there and say great product and get their 25 points.
I'm kind of two minds on one element of this, and I know there's been a sort of a little discussion on this about whether or not you give away the rules, like what are the criteria to get to the next level. I know personally we don't release sort of what our formulas are for getting to next rank levels, and I think that's sort of traditionally been the best practice. I have seen some more communities more recently who have sort of published their rules for what gets to the next level. I still think not giving, sort of telling what behaviors reward, but not necessarily how many times you have to perform the behavior is probably the right way to go. Otherwise, they'll know, oh, I need to do 1,000 posts and I'll get to that next rank level. That's what they're going to go for, and they're going to put the review with just the period in there. Before this community, another community I worked on, we did have some gaming of the system, and it was one where it was sort of a flaw of the system itself, and I think the Lithium platform allows for or prevents this type of flaw. But we had an issue where we had basically like a Q&A format like you would find in Lithium, but it was limited to where there could only be 10 answers to a question. So someone could ask a question, and then whoever got the most votes in answering that question got the points or whatever it worked out. But they would only limit it to 10 answers, and once the 10 answers were in, they would close the board. And what was happening is, as soon as the question was posted, this clique had formed, and they would all post their answers in there. And if someone who was outside of their clique got an answer in there, there were times where they would report that post as inappropriate content to get that post removed, to leave a gap for someone else in their clique to come back in and make the answer. So for us, it's always been, let's get as much content out there as we can, so we don't limit the amount of posts. We don't put any kind of limitations on how people participate and how they game in, how they sort of take advantage of the gamification, how they participate in the gamification, because we don't want to make it sort of a limited game playing field. We want to make it somewhere where everybody can participate, and then the best answers or the best content or the best behaviors will all surface up, and that's what gets rewarded.
Yeah, we keep our formula secret, and the other thing is we add a longevity component to the formula. Because what I found is the people that come in gung-ho to move up the ranks and try and game the system, they get bored pretty quickly. So if they're not continually getting badges or ranks, they'll leave. So if you limit it with you have to have been around here for a month or 6 months to reach certain levels, and that helps limit those behaviors.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot you can do by design, and that kind of gating that you mentioned, where they need to be in there for a certain amount of time. You can't cheat time, as far as I know. Equally, there's the moderation side to it, really. So not just the moderation team on the community staff, but also I found the community itself will tend to self-moderate and spot someone doing this, and if you've done a good job of growing the community and have a good relationship with it, they will simply inform you and say, hey, there's somebody who's posting a lot of spam, or looks like they're giving themselves kudos, you probably want to do something. And then the community tools let you revoke those or even ban those spare accounts that they've created. So those are the usual tricks there, and they're pretty easy to spot.
Oh yeah, excuse me. And another thing I would say is, feel free to step in, and if you see people gaming the system, a lot of in the previous community that I worked on, which was very tech-based, people would game the system, and then they would go on the community bragging about gaming the system. So making sure that you have the right guidelines in place for letting them know, hey, you know what, we implemented the system so that people can participate in a meaningful way and be rewarded. And maybe it's something as simple as sending this user a private message explaining, maybe why you're revoking a badge, removing their posts, things like that. So I think with that, there's a little bit of element of moderation as well. And you want to be able to do it in a nice way, but also be firm, making sure people know that this is ultimately you're running the community, and that they basically can't do whatever, do whatever you want and game the system and get in the way of actually having a purposeful and meaningful system. Cool. So let's moving on to the next question. You guys have had a good amount of experience with gamification and implementing gamification either at your current communities or in previous ones. What are some top tips that you would give to someone implementing gamification?
I think you need to have, first and foremost, you need to have structure. And that structure needs to be challenging but also attainable. And especially if you're in early phase one, it needs to be set up in a manner so that you will quickly be able to identify who are those valuable members that will be emerging. And of course, you don't want to build out too many levels or too complex or too detailed, because you can always add later, because again, it's not an exact science. But I think the rule of thumb certainly needs to be that you're not giving away the store, but at the same time, it needs to be challenging enough so that you're going to identify those people that are going to provide value that map to your goals.
I think I would say that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, take a look at Dr. Wu's kind of spectrum of gamification. So you want to start off on the low end with something easily attainable, a quick win to get people hooked, so they can see their points. And then you have, progressively harder and more difficult and more complex goals that will take longer to keep them interested over the long haul. So it's important to have that spread over the entire sequence.
I would just, again, along those lines of thinking like a game designer as well, remember that like those initial first engagements, you don't want to spam people, but you want to make it fairly easy to get the first few, partly because I always say don't underestimate how big a jump it is making the very first post. That can be even intimidating for some people, so you definitely want to reward that and those first single actions, but then it needs to get gradually more difficult as the users get more engaged, because if it's as easy as it was on day one, then you get bored with the game, or similarly you get bored with the gamification process. So it needs to kind of get more and more, you get more and more invested in a community, and so you're willing to put in that extra time, and the sort of gaps between rewards can get longer because they're invested in the community, and it should mean something once they take a month for them to get the next rank, or even longer. So there's kind of gaps between badges and ranks, and all the gamification elements need to get more and more difficult, and that's a good thing because they're sufficiently engaged, and if it was too easy, then they'd lose interest.
and we touched on this earlier, but I'd also add that to make sure it fits with the personality of your community, to make sure that what you're doing really does align with who your customers are, who's going to be using the community. One things that we've really spent a lot of time on is with our rank names, and we're hopefully going to be implementing sort of some new ranks in the next month or so. But trying to find ranks that really sort of align with who our customers self-identify as, but also may not be sort of seen as derogatory or negative. We don't want to insult anybody with a rank name inadvertently, so we've really sort of spent a lot of time brainstorming literally hundreds of rank names that would fit into the sort of the theme that we've come up with, and really trying to make sure it's something that no matter what rank you got, you wouldn't be upset getting that rank, and really trying to sort of build it into something that, oh, this is a cool one, but the next one's going to be even cooler. And so we, as we go through this, we're actually reaching out to some of our super users who we're doing this as part of the process, and sort of saying, hey, which of these do you like? So as we expand our gamification, we're definitely trying to get our customers' input into what we're doing, so that we make sure it's something that they are motivated by and that they're actually interested in going forward with.
I think it's it's really important to go for branding with that matches the company, and you can definitely have fun with it. I think sometimes the brand might not be suitable to it isn't inherently fun, so maybe I've got some customers where they kind of develop a brand just for the community and then apply that to gamification. But others, there's one customer I really like what they've done. They're an internet provider in the north of England, and they've gone for kind of Yorkshire-themed names. Like they've got Community Gaffer, which is like means boss in the north of England. So that's just one example where they've really had fun of theming it along with their a company from the north of England. So they've really run with that brand, and I think it's just much more fun and engaging as a result.
Well, actually, I wanted to hop into something that Jeff mentioned earlier, which is, as you look at those rank structures, making sure that you don't offend anyone, first of all, and that it's a rank that people would want to attain. And so I was thinking, like, what are the who are the stakeholders that you involve in your gamification process? Excuse me. And who are those stakeholders, and not only in, say, the rank structure, but also in designing your gamification system? Who do you guys involve in the process?
I'll go and start. We definitely involve our brand team just to make sure that whatever come up is they're sort of the final approvers. But before that, we have a small team of moderators that are helping on our board. They're very familiar with how the community works and who our users are, and they're also very involved with our company. So we go out to them, and they're sort of our first stage. But we'll also work with sort of cross-functional teams that may have overlap with our communities. For example, our social teams, and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Does this conflict with anything that you may be doing? We don't want to be creating something that they may also be doing as a mirror and might confuse the customer. So we really try and involve any teams that may have something going on that's very similar to what we're trying to do. But primarily, it's our internal community management team and moderators. It's our key super users, and then our linked partners internally, and then ultimately our brand team.
Yeah, I think involving the community is one of the most important aspects, and my time at Spiceworks, that's where some of the most fun and interesting badges came from. For instance, we had one user who wanted me to create a badger badge just because he liked the pun of having a badger badge. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then he sent me a stuffed badger in the mail with a note that said, the next one will be a real badger. So I was like, okay, I'll make you a badger badge. And we made the rule that you have to take a photo of yourself with a badger, whether real at a zoo or, a stuffed animal or something like that. And then you would be awarded that badge after you posted your photo on the community.
I love that. Sorry, I was just laughing while Nick was describing that. Yeah, basically having fun with the community. Love it. Moving right along. So we talked about gamification, implementing gamification, and I'd be interested to know how did your gamification system evolve over time in your community?
Well, I think the ones that I've been involved in are sort of like what we're doing even in-house right now. And with past communities, we've started off with really sort of keeping it very basic. It's just based on this key sort of badging metrics. And I think what's going on now is that gamification, we're really more focused on identifying super users and experts, people that we can sort of trust to sort of be almost a quasi-representative of our brand on our community. So we're looking at how do we badge them to give them a little bit more of a status within the community, so that they're sort of seen as our VIPs or our customer experts. So it's much more about sort of looking at, first level would be sort of just behaviors on the community, but then the second level is how do we get those people much more involved into sort of development and growth of the community going forward. So it's less about behavior, more about sort of identifying those super users, those experts.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, we started out with ranks here at WebRoot and then moved on to badges. And yeah, it's important to keep adding new badges and ranks as needed, especially as the community matures. The other thing to look out for is, be thoughtful about your changes, because if you add something and it doesn't work out, it's hard to walk that back. You can upset a lot of people if you kind of break the system and make it so that people feel like there's a sense of unfairness, or new members get to move up the ranks faster than I did because you guys changed the algorithm or something like that. So it's important to keep that consistency.
Yeah, there always needs to be that sense that the people who are really high up there earned it as well. So and you're right, you don't want it to seem like, oh, I'm never going to reach those heights, because it's sort of impossible. So it's important to factor that in with the design.
Yeah, and I would concur that, again, it's an evolution. So you start with the basics, you add more elements over time. It goes from the virtual to more of the in-person meetup elements, and as well as the additional permissions. But keeping a close tab as far as consciously being aware of what you're adding, and making sure that you're getting some level of feedback to make sure that it's working as you expect it to.
Yeah, and make sure you take a look at what other communities are doing. You can get a lot of good ideas from other people's systems that you may not have thought of. So, keep an eye on, what's out there, what people are trying out and having success with.
Yeah, definitely. I would say there too, adding to what Nick said, I would expand your horizons. I think one mistake that I made early on as a community manager was looking at B2B communities. That was the first community that I managed, and just looking at those in, say, the tech or software industry. But I think that the neat thing about community management is oftentimes you can look at what other communities are doing. They might be B2C, they might be B2B, they might be in a completely different industry, but what you can do is take what you're seeing, what you like, and learn to tweak that for your own community. So you might not, do the exact same thing, but you can learn from that. Like, what behind that success can you learn from? What are the contributing factors to that success? What made it work, and how can you implement that in your own community? And so I want to end on a successful note. Speaking of successes, what are some success stories that you guys have had with gamification, specific ways that you've implemented gamification and seen it impact, say, like your metrics, your community, or even your business on a broader scale?
So this is Don. I think having, again, as we talked about earlier, setting up a structure and naming and branding that aligns to the culture of the company. Again, so ours is called the Dojo, having a belt structure that really appeals to the user base that we have. But also working closely with the marketing team, the branding gods within our company, to align on how we map that. And also we have sort of a parallel effort where we have these power users of our product called major domos and trying to identify, are those folks in the community, not in the community? How do we reach out to them? How do we get them involved and marry those and map those to those people that are evolving who may not yet reach that offline, but marry those two in the community itself. So I think the badging element, the ranking element, the permissions element, and then marrying that as well with the recognition of these award events, VIP events, and meetups.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the things that really has sort of been a win with the past communities that I've worked in is that the gamification has allowed us to sort of group our users and really identify who those influencers are and who those super users are. And we've been able to not only sort of keep them motivated, but we've been able to use them in other ways that involve them in things like Diana was saying with meetups, or we've had some of our top community members in the past appear as panelists, customer panelists during company events, or even at customer events, large conferences that we've hosted. It's just a great way to, a lot of times, so our support hub is a customer support function. And a lot of times when you deal with customer support, you're getting people who are not particularly happy with their product. They're having a problem and they're contacting you. We can always turn them around with our CS agents, but on the support hub, we find we get people who are super fans of our brand as well, who love just being engaged with the brand. And it's just another avenue for us to identify those advocates, those cheerleaders, those people who are really positive about your brand, and try and get them involved and find out what else we can do to make them stay motivated. And bringing them onto panels, bringing them into the office to meet with executives, meet with development teams, putting them on conference calls, those are the kinds of things that really come out of gamification, because it really helps you filter out who are the most active members and who are the people that are really going to have an input.
Yeah, one of the things we've seen here at WebRoot since implementing the badge system is it's helped to engage some of the top tier folks are already as engaged as they can be. They spend every waking moment on the community. So adding badges, you can't get any more engaged than they already are. But the folks below that on kind of a secondary tier that might be more occasional, we've seen a bump in those numbers of getting them more hooked, having them come back more often and participate more than they might at the more median level that they're at. And then another fun win, this was from Spiceworks days, so we had a contest to design a sticker, and it was featuring the mascot that the community had come up with for the community called Spice Rex. It was an orange T-Rex dinosaur. And one of the community members liked one of the sticker designs and the whole concept so much, she ended up getting a tattoo of that design. So that was one of those things that, it's like, there's not many brands that inspire that level of loyalty, like your Apple or something like that. So that was pretty amazing. So we made an ink badge for her, and she, as far as I know, is the only one who has it. We also, brought her, all expenses paid to the user conference that year, and kind of brought her up on stage to recognize that. And we made some temporary tattoos of that design so that people at the conference could, do a temporary tattoo of that. So the CEO got up on stage and, had that up on his arm and kind of showed it off to recognize her. So that was pretty awesome.
I think we're just all in shock after that last story. That's pretty terrific.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun on that community, which is something I think that's part of what makes the gamification so successful and gets people so excited about it. So.
Yes, I would say, I think these guys have said it well, but as you implement gamification, learn to pivot and have fun with it, right? You have things that you're going to do, but there's also results that you never would expect. Like, next example, someone who has a tattoo, actually, of the community mascot. That's pretty neat, and I think those are times when you can really recognize the users in a surprising and fun way, and be able to just share that success, whether it's at a user conference or within the community or something else. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to share today around this topic? No? All right. Well, I wanted to thank everyone again for joining us today on Air with Lithium, and especially to our amazing panelists, Donnie, Jeff, Nick, Pete. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to share your experiences and insights with us. We'll see you again next time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. See you guys.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.